February 1942, Midway Naval Intelligence Center, Pearl Harbor. A single light flickers in the code room as Ensign Daniel Harlow stares at the shredded remains of a classified transmission. The Japanese had broken another U.S. military code. In the humid air, frustration crackles louder than the Morse signals. A teletype clatters another decoded Japanese message, intercepted, precise and devastating. Across the Pacific, American convoys are ambushed before they even depart. Colonel James McNaughton of the Marine Corps Intelligence Division slams his fist on the table. "They're reading us like an open book," he growls. Weeks of effort, entire encryption systems, all rendered useless within days. Japan's cryptographers, some trained at the Tokyo Imperial University, were dissecting Allied messages faster than they could be replaced. The American command faces an invisible enemy not on the battlefield, but inside the wires, the airwaves, the frequencies of war. Every radio transmission could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. Harlow looks up from his notes. "Sir, we need a code they can't even begin to understand." But what kind of code could exist beyond the reach of logic, mathematics, and language itself? Thousands of miles away, deep within the red mesas of Arizona and New Mexico, a people spoke a language so intricate and unwritten that even linguists struggled to map its grammar. To most Americans, it was just another native dialect. To military minds desperate for secrecy, it was the perfect cipher hidden in plain sight. In March 1942, Major General Clayton Vogel of the U.S. Marine Corps receives an unusual proposal. A civilian engineer named Philip Johnston, the son of a missionary who grew up among the Navajo, walks into Vogel's office with a quiet conviction. "I believe I have your solution," Johnston says, unfolding a small notebook filled with strange words. "Seni twelia, beish bichahi, da ya two." These aren't random syllables, Johnston explains. They're Navajo, a language no German, no Japanese, no outsider has ever mastered. Vogel frowns. "You're telling me we can build a code from this?" Johnston nods. "Sir, this is the code. You won't need ciphers, you won't need machines, just men who can speak and men who can trust." Outside, the Pacific rumbles with distant thunder. The Battle of Coral Sea looms. The Marines need something no enemy can read, hear, or even think to understand. The idea sounds absurd, and yet, in the chaos of a world war, absurdity might be the only thing left unbroken. Vogel leans back in his chair. "All right, Mr. Johnston, bring me 6 Navajos." The silence in the room feels like the calm before a revolution in communication. The age of the Code Talkers is about to begin. April 1942, Camp Elliott, California. A dusty Marine Corps base on the outskirts of San Diego hums with the clang of mess tins and the bark of drill sergeants. But behind a chain-link fence near the radio huts, something extraordinary is happening. 6 young Navajo men stand nervously before a cluster of officers. They wear crisp Marine uniforms, but their eyes carry the calm of the desert. Among them, Chester Nez, Alan Dale June, and Lloyd Oliver men who grew up herding sheep in the mesas, who had never seen the ocean, now about to invent one of the most impenetrable codes in military history. Major General Clayton Vogel steps forward. "Gentlemen," he says, "you've been chosen for something that doesn't exist yet." A small radio crackles. The first test begins. Philip Johnston, acting as interpreter, explains the challenge: translate common military terms into Navajo, but without giving away their literal meaning. They need words that could be transmitted fast, recalled instantly, and understood only by those trained to listen. Chester Nez adjusts his headset. He speaks slowly into the microphone. Nahashhidi, hummingbird. The word travels through the airwaves to the receiving end, where another Navajo Marine decodes it instantly. In the new lexicon they are building, hummingbird will mean fighter plane. Laughter and astonishment ripple through the command tent. Vogel exchanges a glance with Johnston. "Do it again," he says. "Beish du twizi, iron fish." The receiving operator smiles. Submarine. Each translation is poetic, natural, untraceable by pattern or cipher. There are no numbers, no symbols, no repetition to crack. The Japanese can't even hear the meaning, it sounds like pure melody. Within weeks, the 6 recruits expand the vocabulary to hundreds of terms. Turtle means tank. Chicken hawk means dive bomber. 2 hands means company. They even create a phonetic alphabet using Navajo words for animals and objects to spell out English letters. A becomes wollachi, ant. B becomes shush, bear. C becomes moasi, cat. By May, the first Navajo codebook is complete, but it's never written down. Every man memorizes the entire system. The Marines test it. A message that takes a machine 30 minutes to encrypt and decode is sent by the Navajos in 20 seconds, perfectly accurate. Major Vogel slams his palm on the table. That's it. That's the code. Within days, orders are signed. The Marine Corps authorizes the recruitment of 200 more Navajo men for a top-secret program. Their mission: to carry the unbreakable voice of the American war effort. Before deployment, Johnston gathers the original 6 beneath the desert sunset. Remember, he tells them quietly, you're not just speaking for yourselves. You're carrying the voice of your ancestors into the war. The next morning, they board a train bound for San Diego Harbor destination, Guadalcanal. A new weapon is leaving American soil, not steel, not fire, but language. August 1942, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The jungle breathes like a furnace. Cicadas scream. Mud sucks at the boots of exhausted Marines as they slog through the humid darkness toward the Tanaru River. Somewhere in the black canopy, Japanese machine guns wait. In a makeshift command tent lit by red lanterns, Captain Ralph J. Sturkey listens to the static of the field radio. We've got one chance to call in artillery before sunrise, he mutters. The problem? Every code they've used so far has been intercepted. The Japanese are responding to US transmissions within minutes, but tonight a new voice joins the network. Private First Class Chester Nez kneels beside the radio, sweat glistening on his brow. His fingers hover over the transmitter. He glances at the captain. Permission to send in Navajo, sir. Sturkey hesitates, then nods. Do it. Nez inhales sharply, then begins. Da na ta, a sho da, bisodi, da her ti. The sounds roll through the airwaves, rhythmic and alive. 2 miles away, another Marine Corporal, Roy Begay, receives the message. He decodes it instantly, repeating it in English. Enemy tanks advancing from the east. Request heavy mortar fire. Grid 4 to 7. The fire mission goes through. Moments later, the hills erupt in thunder. Japanese armor is shredded before it reaches the American lines. For the first time, the enemy doesn't react. No counter-signal, no intercepted warning. Just silence and confusion. Captain Sturkey stares at Nez. They didn't catch it, he whispers. Not a damn word. Word spreads across the island. The Indian code works. Within days, Navajo operators are assigned to every major command unit in the Pacific. They move between foxholes, carrying radios that weigh more than they do, their voices carrying coordinates, call signs, and commands through the thick tropical air. Each message sounds like music, fluid, fast, and utterly incomprehensible. In one engagement near Mount Austin, a Japanese unit attempts to triangulate an American signal. They capture a short transmission between 2 Navajos and record it for analysis. When their top cryptographers in Tokyo hear it, they assume it's some form of Chinese or perhaps a local dialect from the Philippines. Weeks later, they admit defeat. The structure is too alien, the sounds too nuanced. It isn't just a code, it's a worldview shaped by centuries of oral tradition. Back on Guadalcanal, the Code Talkers prove their worth again and again. During the fight for Henderson Field, a single radio team transmits over 800 error-free messages in under 48 hours. The Japanese, blind and deaf to this new system, can only guess. By the end of 1942, Navajo voices have become the lifeline of the U.S. Marine Corps. Orders for reinforcements, Air strikes and rescues all flow through their language. One night, as rain pelts the canvas roof, Chester Nez scribbles in his journal, "They don't understand us, not just our words, but our spirit. The land taught us to speak in ways they cannot break." For the first time since Pearl Harbor, American communications are truly secure, and in the heart of the Pacific, a whisper in Navajo is worth more than any bullet. Spring, Samilandredas and Party T, Camp Pendleton, California. The Pacific winds whip through the parade grounds as a new wave of recruits steps off the transport trucks. 200 Navajo men, many barely out of high school, line up beneath the Marine Corps flag. They've traveled from the mesas of Arizona, the canyons of New Mexico, the wind-swept plateaus of Utah, answering a call that few outsiders even know exists. Each man carries a letter stamped confidential. It doesn't say what they'll do, only that their skills are critical to the success of the United States Marine Corps. Sergeant Major Bill Toledo, one of the original Code Talkers from Guadalcanal, stands at the front of the line. "You're not here to fight with rifles," he tells them. "You're here to fight with your tongues." Training is brutal. The Navajos march, crawl, and sweat through the same drills as every Marine bayonet practice, marksmanship, forced marches. But after hours, they gather in a separate classroom, surrounded by chalkboards covered in strange symbols. The phonetic Navajo alphabet, combat vocabulary, and call signs for every letter, ship, and aircraft in the Pacific Fleet. "Remember," Toledo warns, "no one outside this room must ever know our code. Not your family, not your officers, not even other Navajos who aren't part of this program." They memorize hundreds of terms until their tongues ache. Sidinez Eagle, meaning transport plane. Chedagahi Tortoise, meaning tank. Loso Whale, meaning battleship. Within months, each man can encode and decode a message in seconds. Accuracy is absolute. There are no written manuals, no codebooks to capture. Every detail lives only in their memory and in the breath that carries it. One evening, Major Vogel visits the classroom. He watches as the recruits practice sending rapid-fire transmissions over field radios. The air crackles with rhythm and precision. "They sound like drummers," one officer murmurs. "They are drummers," Vogel replies, "just not of war drums of language." By mid-1943, Navajo Code Talkers are attached to every Marine division headed for the Pacific. From Tarawa to Bougainville, they form an invisible network of communication that moves faster than any machine cipher in history. Japanese intelligence notices a shift. Their analysts intercept countless transmissions, short, clipped, melodic. They log them all, confident they'll break the mystery soon. Weeks turn to months. Every linguistic expert in Tokyo is consulted. Some suspect it's a dialect of Tibetan, others swear it must be coded English. None are even close. Back at Camp Pendleton, the new recruits graduate in silence. There are no parades, no medals, no mention in newspapers. They are ghosts men whose very existence is classified. Before deployment, an officer gathers them in the mess hall. "You will never receive public credit," he says solemnly. "Your names may not appear in reports, but make no mistake, history will owe you everything." The next morning, the Code Talkers board ships bound for the Central Pacific. Their destination, Tarawa, the bloodiest coral island on Earth. The sea swallows the horizon as the engines rumble. The men sit quietly, heads bowed, repeating the words that will soon guide Marines through hell. Turtle, shark, dragonfly, victory. Their code, sacred, invisible, unbreakable, will soon be tested in fire once again. November 20, 1943, Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands. The dawn explodes in fire. Naval guns thunder from offshore battleships, the sea boiling with shellfire as the 2nd Marine Division surges toward the coral reef. The landing craft grind to a halt hundreds of yards from the beach. Low tide has stranded them in the open. Japanese machine guns open up instantly, cutting through men and metal alike. In the chaos, communication breaks down. Wires are shredded, radios jammed, field telephones destroyed. Officers scream over the roar of gunfire for reinforcements that never come until a calm, unshaken voice breaks through the static. Ahita, dahiti, tkinneita. Private First Class Thomas B. Gay, crouched behind a smouldering tank hull, is transmitting in Navajo. Each word carries coordinates, squad designations, and fire missions encoded and spoken faster than any cryptographic machine could ever manage. His partner, a fellow code talker named Joe Kiyayumiya, relays artillery positions to the offshore fleet. On board the USS Maryland, a radio operator receives the transmission, decodes it in under 30 seconds, and passes the order to the gunners. The horizon flashes white. Shells rain down with pinpoint precision, annihilating Japanese bunkers that had pinned the Marines for hours. Captain McNaughton, watching through his binoculars, mutters under his breath, "Whoever that was just saved an entire battalion." The Navajo Code Talkers work non-stop, often knee-deep in blood and seawater, radios strapped to their backs. They transmit casualty reports, supply requests, and airstrike coordinates under relentless fire. Not one message is misdelivered, not one intercepted. Japanese intelligence officers on Tarawa attempt to eavesdrop. They record a short Navajo message and rush it to their command post for decoding. The colonel in charge listens once, twice, then shakes his head in frustration. "It sounds like music," he says. A storm with rhythm. The confusion spreads through Japanese ranks. Their interpreters know English, Chinese, even some native Philippine dialects, but Navajo is unlike anything they've ever heard. The syntax, the tonal shifts, the hidden metaphor within every word, it's beyond their logic. After 76 hours of fighting, Tarawa is secured. Over 1,000 Marines are dead. But the island is taken, and throughout the carnage, Navajo Code Talkers have transmitted more than 800 critical messages without error. At dusk, the survivors gather among the wreckage. Smoke rises from the burning palm groves. A young Marine, bloodied and trembling, approaches Thomas Begay. "I don't know what you said out there," he admits, "but it worked." Begay wipes grime from his face and smiles faintly. "I told them the sea was ready to help us." For the first time in the war, US commanders realize the full potential of the Navajo network. The code isn't just secure, it's alive, flexible, human. Within weeks, new orders are issued. Every Marine division heading into combat must have its own team of code talkers. The unbreakable voice of the Navajo will now echo across the Pacific, from the volcanic islands of the Gilberts to the heart of Japan's empire. And as the Marines prepare for their next target, Saipan, the enemy still doesn't even know what language they're fighting against. The 15th of June 1944, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The surf hisses as the first wave of Marines rushes ashore. The air smells of sulfur and cordite. Behind them, the ship's guns hammer in rhythm, but even the thunder of war cannot drown out the staccato of urgent Navajo transmissions cutting through the static. Inside a shallow crater, Corporal Samuel Sandoval grips his handset, helmet tilted low. "Tse, nil," he calls rock. Then, a rapid string of Navajo words forms a message no enemy can comprehend. Turtle advancing north. Fire Dragon, at coordinate 12 to 5. Within seconds, naval artillery answers. The Japanese pillbox that had held the line for hours disappears in a cloud of flame. Overhead, Marine bombers swoop low, guided entirely by Navajo relays. For the first time, air, sea, and ground coordinate flawlessly, not through machines, but through men who carry centuries of oral discipline in their breath. When the Japanese attempt to jam the frequencies, the code talkers switch channels in seconds, adapting seamlessly. Their tone never falters. To the untrained ear, it sounds like song, echoing between palm trees and cliffs. By the end of Saipan, the results are undeniable. More than 1,500 Navajo transmissions, 0 errors. The US advance quickens. What once took hours of decoding now takes minutes. General Holland Howlin' Mad Smith sends a brief message to headquarters. Navajo Code Talkers indispensable. Deploy to all major operations. And so, by early 1945, they land where few are expected to survive Iwo Jima. The 19th of February 1945, Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands. The sea crashes black against volcanic ash. 30,000 Marines pour onto the beach as Mount Suribachi looms above, its cliffs bristling with Japanese guns. Within minutes, entire companies vanish under mortar fire. Radios fail, wires burn, chaos reigns. But then, through the haze and screams, comes a clear, steady rhythm. Dahe, ti, bisodi, ga. Of thing, Private First Class Joe Hosteen Kelwood is crouched in the sand, transmitting through an SCR 300 radio the size of a suitcase. His partner, Wilson Price, repeats the message back to confirm. In less than 48 hours, Navajo Code Talkers send more than 800 messages coordinating airstrikes, ammunition drops, and troop movements. One Marine officer later says, "Without those guys, we'd never have taken Iwo Jima." Even the Japanese intelligence on the island, known for their cunning radio intercepts, are helpless. They record multiple Navajo messages and send them to their mainland code analysts. No progress. The sounds have no pattern, no repetition, no grammatical clue. A Japanese linguist later confesses after the war, "It was not a code, it was a spirit." On the fifth day, as the Marines raise the flag atop Mount Suribachi, two code talkers sit nearby, their radios still humming. They don't cheer, they just keep transmitting the unseen thread holding the entire operation together. Their code remains flawless. Not once, across the entire campaign, is it broken or even delayed. When the fighting ends, 25,000 Japanese are dead. The island is secured. And among the Marines, a new legend spreads. The enemy could hear them, but never understand. The victory at Iwo Jima paves the way for Okinawa, and finally the push toward Japan itself. The unbreakable voice of the Navajo now carries the final heartbeat of the Pacific War. Their mission, still secret, will soon end, but their legacy has already changed the fate of the modern battlefield. August 1945, Pacific Command Headquarters, Guam. The war is ending, though no one dares to believe it yet. Maps are still pinned with red markers, and coded transmissions still hum across the islands. But in a quiet corner of the communications room, the Navajo voices keep flowing calm, steady, invisible as ever. Corporal Chester Nez, now a veteran of multiple campaigns, sits before his battered field radio. His uniform is sun-bleached, his face lined with exhaustion. A message crackles through. Tokyo has signaled surrender. He doesn't react immediately, just writes it down in his notebook, the last message he will ever encode in combat. 2 days later, as US forces prepare to occupy Japan, General Holland Smith gathers his officers in a briefing tent. "Gentlemen," he says, "there was no cipher, no machine, no encryption system in this war more reliable than the Navajo voice. But outside that room, few will ever know. The entire program remains classified. The code talkers are sworn to silence even from their families. Their contribution, the very language that saved thousands of lives, is sealed in military secrecy. When the first wave of Navajos returns home, they are greeted not by parades or medals, but by questions. "Where were you stationed?" their families ask. They smile quietly. "We worked the radios." And yet their memories are carved deep. Saipan's heat, Iwo Jima's ash, the desperate whispers of men depending on their words to survive. Some still have nightmares hearing their own language echo over gunfire, the sound that once meant survival. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, captured Japanese cryptographers face their own reckoning. Allied intelligence officers show them intercepted Navajo transmissions. The analysts shake their heads. "It wasn't a code," one admits softly. "It was a living tongue and it beat us." In the years that follow, the US military quietly studies the success of the program. Intelligence officers estimate that the Navajo Code Talkers shortened the Pacific War by months, perhaps saving tens of thousands of lives. By 1946, the unit is officially disbanded. The code remains classified until 1968 over 2 decades of silence. The men go home to their reservations, to lives of quiet labor and faith, carrying an unspoken pride no medal could ever represent. In Gallup, New Mexico, a small ceremony is held. Only a handful attend. The chaplain reads a line from Scripture. "Blessed are the peacemakers." Then he looks up and adds, "And blessed are those who spoke peace in the language of war." Chester Nez places his radio headset in a wooden box. He closes it gently, like a sacred relic. The war that devoured continents has ended, and its most perfect code has vanished back into the red earth from which it came. The wind over the mesas carries a sound soft, rhythmic, ancient, the same voice that once carried the secret orders of a world at war. Unbroken, unforgotten, unseen. The 17th of September 1968, Window Rock, Arizona. The desert sun burns gold over the mesas as an old Marine sits outside his small home, a battered radio on his lap. Chester Nez turns the dial slowly, hearing the static hiss, a familiar sound that once meant life or death. He's waited 23 years for this day. The Navajo Code Talkers program has finally been declassified. Across America, newspapers run headlines about a secret weapon that baffled Japan. Journalists call, historians marvel, and politicians promise recognition. But for the men who carried those radios through hell, it feels strange to see their silence turned into story. Chester smiles softly. "Now they'll know," he says. "Now our language will live." Within months, surviving code talkers begin speaking publicly, visiting schools, giving interviews, recording the vocabulary that once could not be written. They teach words that saved lives. Dahitich, destroyer. Shash, bear. Tikin nita, ice or north. Each syllable carries the rhythm of drums, the heartbeat of a people who turned their heritage into armor. In Washington, D.C., Marine Corps historians assemble the first official record of the Code Talkers service. They calculate that during the Pacific Campaign, over 800 Navajos served in every major assault from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. They transmitted more than 800,000 messages, every single one without error. General Howard Connor, who commanded communications on Iwo Jima, testifies, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." Still, formal recognition comes slowly. Decades pass before the U.S. Congress finally awards the Congressional Gold Medal to the original 29 Code Talkers, the men who first forged the code at Camp Pendleton. The ceremony in 2001 is solemn, radiant with memory. President George W. Bush stands before the surviving veterans and says, "Your courage, your language, and your loyalty gave America victory." Tears glint in the old warriors' eyes. They bow their heads not in pride but in reverence. For the ancestors who taught them the sacred tongue, for the brothers who never came home, for the simple truth that their identity, once scorned, had become the very key to freedom. Today, the legacy of the Navajo Code Talkers endures. Their story is taught in classrooms, carved into monuments, immortalized in film. On reservations across the Southwest, young Navajo children recite words once whispered in the heat of battle, not to fight, but to remember. At the Navajo Nation Veterans Memorial, the wind moves through the red stone arches like breath. Etched on the wall are the words. The voice of the wind, the unbreakable code. My tin. As the sun sinks behind the mesas, its light fades into the same ochre glow that once colored the Pacific horizon. Somewhere, perhaps in memory or spirit, the radios still hum, carrying the ghostly echoes of a language that no enemy could break. A language that defended a nation and healed the silence of a people.